ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनाशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे. So, Hare Krishna everyone, we welcome you all for today's discussion on the topic titled as Hijack. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is a part of a mind management series which is based on the teachings of Lord Shri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita often is called as a religious book, but if I am asked what is Bhagavad Gita, I would say it is the best self-help book. If you have interest in psychology, astrology, numerology, astrophysics, mechanical engineering, biology, whatever, you'll find some great pieces of wisdom or words of wisdom in Bhagavad Gita. And many of it are yet undiscovered or have not been found by the modern science. So the subject matter of mind management is primarily focused to understand the psychophysical state, not psychophysical, I mean psychological state of our existence. All of us would agree and understand individually, psychologically, we all are very different. Okay, we have a different DNA, we have a different physical existence, but even for the twins, the psychologically, their likings, dislikings, their decision making, rationale, etc., is quite different. So mind management series. Today we're going to talk on the topic titled as Hijack. If you pay attention to this subheading, is interaction of mind, intelligence, and senses. Because some of you are here for the first time, therefore I'll give you a very quick recap of the topics that we have discussed right now. So the very first topic that we have had a discussion was on Kabhi Khushi, Kabhi Gham. In essence, in this topic, we had discussed that we all have an experience in life having ups and downs. And I was raising a question through this discussion, is life is all about this, undergoing different experiences of happiness or distresses. Who actually suffers? Who actually enjoys? Who am I was the discussion we were trying to have it. So the summary of this is as follows, as you can see in the screen. So the very first point that you see up here, that was the objective. So I'm not going to go into the whole detailed discussion. We had spoken about the topic, the series is mind management. So I had given a few examples of struggles of mind. And then I had drawn an analogy from a smartphone, where I had compared a smartphone. Smartphone has hardware, software, and for hardware, software to function, it needs a user. I had compared that with our existence, where our body is compared to the hardware of the smartphone, the mind is compared to the software, and the user, which uses the smartphone, we had compared it with the soul. So the smartphone is useless without having the user. Similarly, this body or this existence has no meaning without the presence of a soul. And then we had talked about how when a smartphone gets infected, what gets infected is the software. Then you type A, but gives you response B. It gives you an altered response. Similarly, all of us, how many of you agree that you all want to be always happy? Yes or no? And how many of you say we are not always happy? Yes or no? So, see, there's an altered response. You want to be always happy, but you're not always happy. So, which means is a proof your software is corrupted, hence proved. Yes or no? That's a simple logic, isn't it? So, software is corrupted means what? Our mind is corrupted. Therefore, we are discussing on the topic of mind management. So, according to the scriptures, there are 6 viruses that is our mind is affected with. As you can see here on the screen: anger, lust, greed, illusion, pride, envy, kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mat, matsarya, which has corrupted our mind. So, when you're using a corrupted smartphone for a long period of time, then you consider it is default condition, right? You would think whenever I type A, it gives B, which means this is default setting. Similarly, people unfortunately today think to suffer, to undergo suffering, to have negative thoughts is my nature of existence. It is my nature, it is my default setting. But no, the message and the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita tells us you can fix your software, you can fix your mind. You need not live a miserable life. Bhagavad Gita tells us each one of us are unique and we are here. And not only in the concept of here, our existence is meant to be of Sat Chit Ananda, to live an eternal life full of knowledge and always blissful. Neither we have eternal life nor we are full of knowledge, neither we are full of bliss because our software is corrupted. So, how do we understand software is corrupted? Just like you think the smartphone, this is a default setting. When a software engineer comes and take a look at your smartphone, then he understands it's infected and then he fixes. Similarly, scripture says we need a spiritual master who is a software engineer in the case of a or technician who is in the case of fixing your smartphone. So that's for the discussion. We are discussing on the subject matter of who am I then, where we drew this 3-level model. As you can see, hardware, software, user. Hardware is body made up of earth, water, fire, air, ether, which is the modern science also recognizes. Earth, the skin, we have more than 70% water in our body, if I'm correct, medically, whatever the portion is. Then air we are breathing in. We are a walking oven, 98 degree Fahrenheit, isn't it? In summer season, you can bake chapati on like this place, in the Delhi. It's so hot. You don't need a fire. and ether. Ether is a space between the molecules. So this is what earth, water, fire, ether. Bhagavad Gita 7.4 talks about it. We'd also discuss difference between living and non-living. What is living? Which undergoes 6 changes: birth, growth, maintenance, byproducts, dwindle, and death. Look at all the living entities, including the plants, birds, beasts, animals, humans. But what is non-living? Is a table. Any man-made thing is a non-living. Why? You cannot bring Maruti Suzuki or Maruti Zen and let's say Luna and make a Mercedes Benz. But you bring a male and female of any species, you get another child, isn't it? That's the point. So you don't have byproduct and you don't have growth. It's not that you buy a table. Let's say I purchase a smartphone today, and after 6 months it will turn into a laptop. There's no growth, but you have a baby. After 6 years he'll grow up, isn't it? And after 16 years you'll have a full grown up adult. So the two things doesn't happen. That's what we are discussed. So long story short, in this discussion we have established who am I, and then who suffers and enjoys was the last question that we have discussed. So body doesn't suffer because body is made up of all this dead matter. The table cannot experience anything. Similarly, soul is already defined Satchitananda. So who experiences all the suffering and happiness is mind, which we further established in the next topic, mind management and mindfulness, wherein we had further looked into the subject matter of how mind experiences. So I will not go into too much details of it, but a quick summary. Mind management means to manage the mind. So manage the mind means to control. So how can you do so? This is what we have discussed, high level discussion. So mind is a cluster of thoughts. Mind is made up of experiences, desires, and it has 3 functions: thinking, feeling, and willing. So what kind of input you give, that kind of output is generated. If you give negative input, then you create negative conditioning. And I had given an example of a horror movie. For more details, please, these recordings are available on our YouTube channel. You can watch it in details. If you give a positive input, then positive conditioning is developed. So, if you're reading a Vedic, if you're reading books like Mahabharata, Ramayana, Bhagavad Gita, then you're consistently giving a positive feedback or positive input to your mind, and that kind of person you get created, or that kind of person you become. And if somebody is subjecting himself to Hollywood, Bollywood movies, stories about criminal activities, you will have what happens in America: shootout, college shootout, shootout at shopping mall, etc. Isn't it? Even an innocent person becomes a violent person because he has subjected himself that kind of inputs. Therefore, we have to be careful of what kind of input we give to our mind. That was one part of mind management discussion. And mindfulness, to become alert, to become present, was the second part of discussion. In this course of discussion, we have discussed about how does a living entity becomes a victim to his own mind. We have discussed the 8 stages of fall down. You remember? Thinking, contemplation, dhyayato vishyan pumsa sangaste supajayate sangas sanjayate kama. If you don't remember that, how many of you remember me giving an example of Bahubali movie? Right? So how you have an exam, and how a person ends up watching a Bahubali movie, or a liquor relapse, we are talking about all that. And finally, the last discussion that we had on this topic of mind management and mindfulness was, um, who is the controller? Am I the controller? Am I the controller of my body? And we had discussed, according to modern science, we have Dr. Lena here, maybe some of the doctors also there. They can affirm our body functions according to our what we call as nervous system. Body functions according to that. And Hare Krishna. Body functions according to the nervous system. And there are two kinds of activity that happens: autonomous, that happens on its own, and second is voluntary. According to modern science, now autonomous is which is it's happening on its own, and voluntary means which we control. So medical science, if a doctor is treating you, is doing an operation on you, unless he has a consent and permission from you, he cannot operate on you, right? The law of the state tells you you're the owner of the body. But the same medical science tells you you only have 5% stake on your body, because you have only 5% control on your body. You can only execute 5% activities. 95% activities are executed by the body itself. Autonomous. Have you seen anything happening by itself? There is always a person behind it, isn't it? So something is happening within the body, just like the beating of the heart, the oxygenation, the filtration, so many things are happening. The breathing in, breathing out, the blinking of the eyelids, isn't it? 95% things are happening by itself. So how does it happen was the last and concluding part of discussion. And we had quoted from Bhagavad Gita 13th chapter. Updrashta anumantacha bharta bhokta maha ishwara. And to make it a point, we have said, somebody may say, oh, I would like to get more control on myself. So we had discussed a case study of Ondine's curse syndrome. Remember? A child was born where he had to breathe by himself. How many of you know how many times you have breathed until now? Anyone controlling their breathing now? Nothing. Imagine from now onwards you have to control your breath. Every breath that you take is done voluntarily. You breathe in and you breathe out. If you would be in this situation, can you ever sleep? So I had shown you the photo of a child who was stuffed with all kind of pipes through his mouth, through his nose, through his ears. Why? Because he cannot fall asleep. So he had to be given an artificial source of oxygen. There was an artificial system connected, so that oxygenation, deoxygenation continues to happen like that. So that is medically called as Ondine's, is the name of a doctor who diagnosed it. Curse, not a blessing. Curse. If you get more than 5% control on your body, it's a curse. Doctor says this, okay? Ondine's curse syndrome. I'm not calling it. You can Google it out for those of you attending it for the first time. So, and we had discussed about paralysis. We say, let's say for example, let's do a quick exercise. So, this discussion is concluded before we get into hijack. All of you, please raise your hands. Okay, all of you are very surrendered and submissive guests. So you followed. Great. But if you pay attention, anything that you do with your body, there is first is a desire to do it. Yes or no? Even when I said raise your hand, you agreed to do it. If you would not have agreed, you would not have done it. Which means if you agree and then you raise your hand, you are the controller, isn't it? And when you say, I would not raise your hand, then you will not raise your hand. The hand will not rise. It's not that you're saying, no, 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 I will not raise, and the hand is going up. That doesn't happen, isn't it? It would never happen. So it means you are the controller, isn't it? Yes or no? How yes? 95% things are happening autonomous. So what kind of controller you are? So desire, fine. But think about it. If desire, we have discussed this is a French scientist by the name of Descartes' mind-body relationship problem that he had coined. If desire, if I will, if it is according to my will, the body functions. We have discussed the case of a paralysis. When let's say somebody's hand is paralyzed. Now, how much ever you will, can your hand will cooperate with you? So how can you say when you will, then it happens? Your hand is still intact. Your hand is still intact with you. Now, medically, you call it paralysis. But when you have your hand connected with you, why you're not able to lift it up if you think you're willing, because you say you are the controller, then lift it now. That's not possible. So what is the answer for it? Please watch the last episode for those of you who have not come. Because if I give you the answer right now, you will not get the whole gist of it. To understand what is actual reason behind it, what is Bhagavad Gita teaches us, the reason for it, and who is actually the controller and how the body and mind interacts, please watch the previous episode. If in case you don't have access, you can let know our admin. And with that, now we come to the next topic titled as Hijack. So let me take you all on a journey, which I don't think so we'll be able to complete today because it took some time for me to give you a recap. So let me take you on a journey. All of you, please raise your visualization ability and visualize you're sitting on a chariot of Arjuna, where you are a co-passenger with Arjuna and you are just a silent observer. And now you're listening to a conversation happening between Arjuna and Krishna as a silent observer, okay? And now Arjuna speaks to Krishna. What does Arjuna says? Atha kena prayuktoyam papam charati purushaha anichannapi vashneya baladiva niyojita. Arjuna said, my dear Lord, I totally agree with whatever you have told me. And we have, until now, we have not only discussed the problem, we also gave the solution. Remember ABCD formula, we discussed all those things. So let's say all of you agree that yes, we're going to follow ABCD formula. A for association of sadhus, B for reading books, wisdom literature, C for chanting the holy names of the Lord, D for diet, vegetarian diet, and more refined is Krishna Prasadam. But yet you will have a challenge like what Arjuna is expressing. He said, my dear Lord, I understood whatever you have explained me so far. I totally agree. Let me ask this question to all of you, those who are present. What we have discussed, those of you who had attended previous sessions, did you agree with what we concluded with? Yes or no? Raise your hands. Okay, so you have agreed and concluded that it's correct. But the problem is we are not yet able to practice it. How many of you agree? Yes? We're not able to practice. I agree, I know this is right, but I'm still not doing the right. And that's a big problem. It's a conflict between the two rights. One is knowing the right, one is doing the right. What is important between both the rights? Doing the right. If you don't do the right, what is the use of knowing the right? And that is what is being explained by Arjuna to Krishna. Atha kena prayuktoyam papam charati purushaha anichan apivashnaya baladiva niyojita. My dear Lord, I know what is right, but I have experienced that sometimes balad eva niyojita, anichan, against my will, Papam charati purusha. I am pulled into doing papa, sinful activity, anichan, against my will, balad, as if I am pulled by a force in doing the wrong thing. How many of you have that experience? And how do I see our online audience? Where is our online audience? So I'm looking at the online audience right now. So please raise a hand. How many of you have this experience where I know what is right, but I fail to do the right? When you fail to do the right means you're doing the wrong thing. As if I am pulled into the wrong thing. So that's the reason I said, please be with Arjuna right now, because Krishna is going to give you some answer which is very, very crucial. All right, let's go back to the presentation again. Where is my presentation? Yes, back. So great. So that's the statement, Arjuna. That's the question Arjuna raised. So Arjuna is asking, my dear Lord, he knows what is right, but still he gives into temptation. We all have agreed it's a valid question. Let me paraphrase this question into a common day problem. Not a common day problem, but consider. Consider a case of a smoker who has been diagnosed with a lung cancer. He's in the final stages. The doctor have told him, if you smoke once again, you will not be able to come back here. That's it. The end. The chapter closes. The wife has pleaded, the kids have pleaded, the friends have warned him, please don't do it. He knows that's the end of me. But there is always a but in life. But Anichanapi Vashnaya, he happens to be in a meeting where he sees his friend smoking. Anichanapi Vashnaya, and the friend says, hey, why don't you smoke? Anichanapi Vashnaya baladi vaniyojita, but I know I should not doing. Everyone have told me not to do it. Yet I fail to say no to him. Agreed? Have you seen experience in your degree? I know everyone have told no to me. Yet I fail to say no to him. And what happens? A relapse. I end up taking. So considering this case, let's paraphrase Arjuna's question to Krishna. When a smoker knows the dangers of smoking to his health, he's been diagnosed by the doctor, he has decided not to smoke again, but still he smokes. And then regrets. What power forces him to do so, although he does not want to do it? Very interesting problem statement here. We all are living in the world of temptations and distractions, yes? Agreed upon? One wrong touch on a smartphone and repeated wrong touch can make it as a habit for us, isn't it? It could be a wasteful activity, time wasters, let's say social media. I mean, social media is a trap, isn't it? The way, for example, Facebook is an unending story. You can keep scrolling life after life, but the page will never end. Hayada, what do you call as wall page or something? News feed. The news will not end. Your generation will die. But even Brahma will leave. The Brahmanda will get destroyed, but the news feed will keep going. It just keeps going. So distractive. So that's the point here. Even we know what is right, we want to follow dharma, but because of so much temptations and distractions, it becomes very difficult. Therefore, knowing is not enough. Knowledge is not all in all. We need strength to apply the knowledge. We are trying to swim against the flow of the river here. You get it? When you have to swim downstream, you don't need any effort. You're pulled along with the wave. But when you have to go against the downstream, which means upstream, then you have to put an effort. Right now, the society is taking you towards destruction. And you are trying to change your direction and go against the flow of the society and live a life free of distractions and temptation. How is it possible? Isn't that difficult? Yes or no? So therefore, knowing that if I take this path, it will be destructive, is the beginning of the story, not the end of the story. To live by that teaching, we need a strength. And that bala is called as spiritual strength. Unless we cultivate spiritual strength, we cannot swim upstream. We cannot force our way against the flow. It is just not possible. Is that making sense to all of you so far? So, knowledge is needed as the beginning, but if we don't apply the knowledge in our life, which means the spiritual practice, if we don't take the spiritual practice seriously, then the strength would never come to apply the teachings of Bhagavad Gita in our day to day life. Therefore, people say, so Bhagavad Gita is so complicated, irrelevant. Bhagavad Gita is not irrelevant or impractical or difficult. You don't have a strength. Just like a small child, when a child is born, can you feed him, let's say, naan or bhatura? Not possible. Poor fellow. Chapter would close a little too early for him, you know. So he is given a diet according to him. He cannot. So similarly, for us to deal with so much difficulty or the environment that we live in, it's just not possible unless we have a spiritual strength. Therefore, Lord Shri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita speaks a lot about lifestyle. Those of you who have attended Bhagavad Gita series, if I'm correct, most of you have attended Bhagavad Gita series here. Is there anyone who has not attended, for example? I believe all of you have attended Bhagavad Gita series. So remember chapter number 14, 15, and 18 were talking about the modes of material nature. What kind of cloth you wear, what kind of food you eat, what kind of hairstyle you have, what kind of music you hear, everything is determined by the modes. That's the subject matter here called as lifestyle. So Krishna dedicated almost more around 50 verses of out of 700 verses, and not 700 verses are spoken by Krishna, but whatever discussion he had, 50 verses is dedicated to the subject matter. Kind of food, kind of the sleeping pattern, etc., etc. So the knowledge that we are getting, the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, should inspire us to bring about changes in our lifestyle. If our lifestyle is not changing, then it's just not gonna work it out. Why? Krishna answers Arjuna's question, and Krishna says, Arjuna, the problem is Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, Rajoguna Samudbhava, Mahashano Mahapapa, Vidyenam Hivarinam. Lord said, Arjuna, Kama, I totally agree with what you're saying. And that balad, that force which is pulling you, anavichinna, without your desire, without your will, is called as kama. In English, it is called as lust. The younger brother of lust is anger. If lust is represented by Ravana, who is Krodha? Kumbhakaran. So whenever there is a lust, Krodha follows behind. I'll explain you. Now when we talk about kama in Sanskrit, it not refers to gross sexual attraction. That's not the only meaning. That's a very gross meaning of it. But we'll restrict our discussion. The lust has a far broader and detailed meaning. But here, desires for enjoyment, you can call it against the principles of dharma, which are not prescribed, which are detrimental for our well-being, that you can call it as a kama. I'll explain you. Krishna says these are born of rajoguna samudbhava. Of what is born of? Rajoguna, mode of passion. That's the reason I spoke about lifestyle. Your goodness, passion, ignorance indicates your lifestyle. So if you don't change your lifestyle, follow spiritual principles, the very basic thing is off. First of all, vegetarian diet. Second thing, we should become human beings again. Be a human being first. Learn some lessons from animals. Every animal, except for the street dogs in the city, sleeps when the sun sets, right? Does a street dog in the city also want to sleep? But what to do? We humans don't let him sleep because of the car, vehicle honking and all that. In America, in Maryland, I was there once with a friend of mine. I had visited there, and I was standing outside the mall, and I saw there was a clinic by the name of Dogs Cleaning. So it was DOG apostrophe S clinic. So there are people with the surname D-U-G, dog. So I thought maybe that's the name of the doctor. You'll have people put things by their name, right? Isn't it? Batra Clinic, etc., etc. Champaklata flower wala, etc., etc. But interestingly, I saw every patient going there in that clinic was going with a dog. So I was a little surprised. I couldn't understand the relationship with the name of the clinic and with the patient going with the dog. So I thought maybe doctor must have put a condition. I only see patients along with dog or something. I don't know. So I didn't knew. So when a friend of mine came back from whatever he had gone and said, I was curious and I asked him, "Hey, it's a little strange. You see that clinic? There's a doctor there, and it says dog's clinic, and whoever is going inside is going with the dog. Do you know what's happening?" He said, "Yes, that's a dog's clinic." I said, "Yes, I know it's a dog's clinic. What is it about?" He said, "It's a dog's clinic." Then I understood कुत्ते का दवाखाना है ये. So I said, "कुत्ते का दवाखाना?" Why would a dog need a clinic? He said, "What to do? Prolong association of humans." They have lost their mental balance. Blame it to the humans for it. What can be done about it? So that's the reason I'm saying be a human first. Become a human. Sleep in time, wake up in time. That's how we change our life. So, anyways, let's focus on this enemy called as karma. Krishna says, Rajoguna samadva born of mode of passion, mahashano mahapapma, nash, right? Mahanash. Krishna is not saying nash, mahanash. Papmani, Krishna is saying mahapap. Is the greatest destructive force, greatest sinful. Vidhi, matlab to know, anam hi varina. Varina means bury, means enemy. Krishna says he is your greatest enemy. And then he looked at Arjuna and said, "Are you afraid?" Arjuna said, Tell me more about him. Then Krishna said, "Arjuna, this enemy covers you in 3 different ways." I'll not read out the verse, I'll give you an example. Krishna gives an analogy. Just like the smoke covers the fire, you blow air, smoke goes away, isn't it? So that's a covering of lust for a person in mode of goodness. He can save himself easily if he's in a mode of goodness life. And then Krishna gives another example is of a mirror covered with dirt. Mirror which has been locked for hundreds of years, and then you open it, it will take a lot of time to remove the dirt, isn't it? It's not very easy to clean the mirror. That is mode of passion. Very easy to come out of this attack of lust. And then the womb, the embryo is covered by the womb. You cannot do anything about it. It has to happen on its own. That is mode of ignorance. So those who have a mode of ignorance life, they are already gone. There is just no hope for them. Their joy, they don't have a joy of life. The misery is what gives them pleasure, actually. They're totally covered over by lust. They're totally dominated by lust. And I'll tell you what this and how this kind of an enemy functions like that. So then Krishna looked at Arjuna. So Arjuna, are you fearful now? Arjuna said, not exactly. Can you tell me something more about it? I'm still figuring out what this lust is. You're calling us the greatest enemy? Please tell me more. Krishna said, okay, let me tell you more. Avratam jnana etena jnanino nityaverina
Jnanino nityaverina
kamarupena kaunteya
Kamarupena kaunteya
dushpurena nalena cha.
Duspurena nalena cha.
Krishna said, Avratam jnanam etena. The intelligence of a wise living entity has been covered over. Jnanino nitya verina. By whom? By verina. Enemy. But here Krishna calls him nitya verina. Eternal enemy. Imagine those good old days when you would go to station to book your train ticket. Have you gone? Remember? Lining up at the ticket counter. And if you remember those good old days, there used to be a lot of push and pull. Particularly when ticket counter will open. People will rush into it. And there's a lot of push and pull. So imagine you have been pushed and pulled by some people. And you're very upset with that person. But the moment you get a ticket, you forget about it, isn't it? You had an animosity to that person who pushed you, pulled you for a while, but when you get a ticket, you moved away. So that's an enemy at one level. Imagine in the Mumbai bhasha, somebody gives a supari on your name. Not Pan Parag Supari, Bombay Supari. You understand Bombay Supari, right, folks here? Somebody gives a ransom on your name in English language. And now you have a very moving behind you with a gun. Wherever you go, he's behind you, looking for an opportunity to take you down, right? That's another level of enemy. But even this enemy would not chase after you after you die. Agreed? When Krishna says Nitya Verina, Nitya means eternal. So this enemy called as lust has been shooting at you, destroying you, killing you, life after life. And now Krishna looked at Arjuna. And he probably looking at you also. Thoda डर लगा? And then Krishna says, Kamarupena kanteya dushpurena nalena cha. And what is the nature of this Kamarupena kanteya? Dushpurena nalena cha. Dushpurena means is never satisfied. Which means a person becomes a humble servant to this enemy called as lust. Whatever the mind dictates, he does it. But the irony is, how much ever you fulfill the desire of this master, the master is never pleased. What it means? Imagine 25th of December. Imagine. You had been longing to purchase Maruti Swift for a long time. You worked for it, you got required money. After 3 years of wait, finally you have gone to the Suzuki showroom, paid the money, and there is your key. With a proud family member of Suzuki family, you take a photo with them, you put in your key. How many of you feel a sense of accomplishment and pride when holding that key which you had been waiting for so long? You ignite the vehicle, and you're driving the car as if you're going back to Godhead. I mean, you're going back to your home, so you have an experience as you're going back to Godhead. You're like, wow, what an experience and joy. So that desire was there, karma was there, you fulfilled it. Now you should be happy, isn't it? Expected to be happy. You know what happened with you, but let me tell you what happened with this gentleman. Right at the street, right at the corner of the street, he turns his vehicle, and there he says a big billboard. आ रहा है 2022 में मारुति स्विफ्ट का नया मॉडल. कितने को चुभने वाला है? हाथ खड़ा करो. अरे 1 week only. I could have waited just 1 week. I could have made a purchase on the 1st January. I would have got the new model. And there it lists all the advanced features which will have at the same cost. फिर तो जरूर आप सोचते कि यूटर्न मार के जाओ क्या पूछूं क्या 1 हफ्ते बाद होगा एक्सचेंज ऑफर है क्या? That is what it means. Kamarupena kanteya dushpurena nalena cha. It's just like pouring petrol in the fire. The more you pour, the more it burns. It is never satisfied. And now Krishna seriously looked at you. So, are you afraid now of this enemy? Yes or no? So he looked at Arjuna, and Arjuna said, yes, my dear Lord, looks like I've got into a trouble. So the point is, Krishna said, Arjuna, you're fearful, and Arjuna nodded his head. But Krishna said, Arjuna, you should not be fearful. How many of you would like to live a life in a fearless environment where you have no fear of anything? Yes or no? So now Krishna tells you why you should not be fearful. You would like to know why you should not be fearful? All right, let's take a look. Krishna says, Arjuna, first of all, know the fact that I'm your father. Please repeat. Mamayavam sujiva lokhe jiva bhuta sanatana manashashtani indriyani prakriti sthani karshati. You are unnecessarily struggling with your mind and the 5 senses, Arjuna. Mamayavam sujiva lokhe. You are my amsha. You are my part and parcel. So Krishna looked at Arjuna and said, Arjuna, why do you struggle? And Arjuna said, I am not struggling. Have you had that experience when you try talking to people, you're unnecessary suffering? You say, no, I'm not suffering. So Krishna said, Arjuna, you're struggling. Arjuna said, no, I'm not struggling. Krishna said, but you are. So how many of you agree or think that you are struggling in your life? How many of you think struggling, or how many of you think you're actually unhappy in your life? Okay, I don't know what's up with the online audience here. Some of them have their hands up and they're smiling. Okay, okay. So they're blissfully suffering. So that's a good consciousness. Okay, okay, all right, all right. So let me tell you the nature of happiness in this world. Now imagine if I bring and give a whole 1 liter Bisleri water bottle of water to you. Some of you may drink it, some of you may not drink it, yes? But imagine all of you here go out in a peak sunny day of the summers and spend few hours playing outside. You're thirsty now. You're too thirsty. And then you come back. And then I give you a water bottle. How many of you say you will gulp it down entirely? Right? And then if I ask you, how do you feel? How many of you say you'll say, Maja aa gaya? Right? Now can you see a relationship between your great thirst and great maja aa gaya? What is the relationship? Okay, sure.
The more thirst you have, the more sense of satisfaction you will have.
Yes or no? The more thirsty you are, to that degree you'll experience the water. Yes? Now, thirst is a happiness or suffering? Thirst is a suffering. So, the relationship between the nature of thirst and your satisfaction in this world is the somebody says, I'm more happy, I'm very happy, understand he's suffering to that much degree. Yes? Agreed or not? Okay, for example, let's say if you're not hungry and I give you your favorite food to you, can you eat and still say maja aa gaya? If you're not hungry at all, you're full up to here. And imagine if you're hungry, really hungry, haven't eaten for 3 days, and I give you khichdi. How many of you say khake maja aa gaya? Right? Although considering khichdi is not your favorite food. The greater the suffering, the greater your experience of joy. So don't get trouble when you see outsiders happy. Understand the picture, the truth behind it, that they are suffering. That is not happiness. What is the value of this happiness which is directly proportional to your suffering? In fact, the relationship between suffering and happiness should be inversely, not directly. The less suffering, more happiness. More suffering, less happiness. But today, the relationship in this world is of suffering and happiness is direct relationship. So that's the point. So let's go back to the presentation. When Krishna said, I am your father, why are you struggling? Arjuna said, I am not struggling. Krishna said, but you are, because you don't understand. Arjuna said, oh my dear Lord, I'm enjoying my life. Soon everything will be okay. Right? Sounds common? Sounds familiar? Hey, why do you worry about future? That's okay, everything will be okay. Anyways, who has seen what will happen after death? Life means to enjoy to the fullest. Why to care for anyone and anything? Krishna said, wait a second. You are misguided. You do not know the truth. Krishna said, Arjuna, after death, after leaving this body, you will have to accept another body. Shariram yad avapnoti. Everyone recite. Yachapi utkramatishvaraha.
यच्चापि युद्ग्रामतीश्वरः
घृत्वैतानि शम्याति
गृहीत्वैतानि संयाति
vayo gandhani vashayat.
वायुर्गन्धानि वाशय.
Krishna said, the living entity in the material world carries its different conceptions of life from one body to another as the air carries aromas. Thus he takes another kind of body and again quits it to take another body. In other words, the living entity moves on from one body, one species to another species. The reincarnation. So human life is a very, very important junction in the 8.4 million species. The human form of life that you and I and all of us have got, it is not meant to be wasted and acquiring some material possessions. No, for sure, when we die, everything stays behind. your degrees, your accomplishment, your bank balance, your wealth. At the most, for whom you leave everything behind, at the most, they'll offer you a plastic flower garland. Yes or no? They'll not even offer you a fresh flower garland. In the storeroom somewhere, in the dingy storeroom, they'll put your photo and there'll be one, throw away plastic flower garland hanging on your photo. There will be only darkness and you looking at each other. So, for whom are you working so hard? Is that really the goal of the life? That's the point we're raising. So, human life is like a train junction. Junction means where you can choose where you want to go. A junction is a place where you make a choice. So, how do you make a choice? Not how do you make a choice. The point is, to travel to certain place, you need two things. First, you need to know where to go. Second, you need to have a ticket, isn't it? Similarly, to make a choice, to be able to make a right choice, there has to be a desire. Desire to come out of the state of suffering. Unless we have the desire to live a blissful life, how can you have a blissful life? And second, a balance to purchase the ticket. That means the karma. And that's how we make a decision in our life like that. Just like an animal, if you're a zookeeper, for an example, you're a zookeeper, let's say you go and feed a cow. You not say ghas and mas, you'll say ghas. And when you have to feed the lion, you will not ask ghas and mas, you'll give him mas, right? And when you go to the hotel and restaurant, the waiter will come and ask you ghas and mas. Yes or no? And then what choice you make determines your future. Animals don't have choice. Who has choice? Humans have choice. And if we don't make the choice today to make the right things in our life, we'll never ever come out of the suffering situation. So, what happens after death? That is what Arjuna had a question in his mind. And Lord said, birth means another set of instruments. Please repeat after me. Shrotram chakshu sparshnam cha rasanam grahanam evacha
Rashanam Granam Evacha
adhisthaya manaschayam
Adhisthaya Manaschayam
vishayan upasevate.
Vishayan Upasevate.
And the translation, the living entity thus taking another gross body obtains a certain type of ear, eyes, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind, and thus enjoys a particular sense objects or particular set of sense objects. In other words, a living entity, life after life, continues on moving from one species to another species of life. According to the species he gets, accordingly he gets his senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, sense of touch, grouped around the mind, and accordingly he continues to suffer and enjoy in the 8.4 million species. Arjuna thought, my dear Lord, if soul exists, why we cannot see him? And Lord Shri Krishna told Arjuna, how many of you think this is a good question? If soul exists, why we cannot see him? Please raise your hands. How many of you think, Arjuna, क्या प्रश्न पूछा है? Googly डाल दी. Let's see what Krishna will say now. All right, let's see how Krishna responds to this googly. Krishna said, you fool, what can you really see? What can you really see? For example, if I ask you, how many living entities are in this room right now? Please count. Ishita, gonna try? How many? Count. Let's Ishita answer. Let's see what Ishita has to say. One is sitting there also. You missed out. So according to Ishita, there are 12. So those of you who are online, how many living entities are there in your room right now? How many can you see? Look around and count. Please give me the count quickly. Varsha says one living entity. Great. Okay. Roshan says countless. There are so many microbes, viruses, ants. So many living entities. What can you see? Yes or no? Agreed. So what can you see? That's what Krishna told Arjuna. And then Krishna said, foolish cannot see the truth. 1 second, please. Foolish cannot see the truth. Please repeat. Utkramantam sitam vapi
क्रामन्तं स्थितं वापि
Bhunjanam va gunanvitam
भुञ्जानं वा गुणान्वितं
Vimudhananupashyanti
विमूढानानुपश्यन्ति
Pashyanti gnanachakshusha.
पश्यन्ति ज्ञानचक्षुषः.
The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. So who cannot understand any of these things? The foolish, right? Krishna says, you are not able to see because you're a foolish. Those whose eyes are trained in transcendental knowledge can see how many living entities are there. Let me give you an example of such a fool. Again, imagine. Right now you are sitting on the chariot of Arjuna, but right now you're sitting in a flight inbound to Delhi, from Pune to Delhi, okay? Or you're comfortably seated in your Air India flight? Or India Air, whatever, Air India, Indian Airlines. So now the plane takes off from Pune airport. You're off to Delhi for your vacation. And just half an hour before the plane is about to land, there begins a ruckus in the plane. People are screaming, and you're surprised what happened. You're sitting on the aisle seat, and you pop your head out in the aisle and see what's happening. And right in the front, you see there is a man with a big beard, wearing a big jacket, holding a gun in his hand, and he says, "Plane is hijacked." Ah! Now you are screaming, and you look at your friend, the neighbor sitting to you. He's cool. He's unaffected. All right. You're terrified. What's going to happen? The plane is about to land. There's only 20 minutes remaining, and suddenly the announcement comes. No, ये प्लेन दिल्ली नहीं जाएगा. इस प्लेन को हम कलकत्ता लेके जा रहे हैं. And all of you begin to scream, no! No, 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 no. And then you look at your neighbor. He's smiling. Now you cannot resist. And you ask, क्या रे? क्यों दांत दिखा रहा है? Why are you smiling? Why are you smiling? And he says, dude, I purchased a ticket for Delhi. I'm getting a free air travel to Calcutta. Give me a high five. And you're like, what? Useless. Leave it. And then the plane is about to land to Calcutta, another 20 minutes for the flight to land. And now the terrorist makes another announcement. नहीं, ये plane Calcutta land नहीं होगा. We'll take this plane to Karachi. Oh no, you're screaming, everyone is screaming at the top of voice, and again you look, and this guy is beaming, showing all his battisi. He's smiling with big mouth, with big teeth, and you look at him. क्या रे? क्यों हंस रहा है? Why are you laughing? Why are you smiling? And he said, पहले free का travel, now फोकट का international travel. Na visa, na ticket, international flight. Give me double tali. So how many of you would say this guy is really a fool? How many of you agree this man is really a fool? Please give me your hands up or no. Quick. So those of you who are in your sleeping zone, because I don't see cameras, so whatever it is. So all of you, those who are at least alert, he is a fool, right? Krishna says that fool is none other than you and I. It's the plane of our life that has been hijacked by an enemy called as lust. And we have failed to understand. And we are moving from one destination to another destination, means from one species to another species. And we are saying, give me high five. And this enemy is taking us life after life to destruction. All of you can see the slide? Oh, let me play the slide again. This enemy is taking us to destruction, life after life. So this is called as hijack, where this hijacker is none other than lust, who life after life brings us to destruction. And we are that foolish person who are not able to see how this eternal enemy called as lust is actually taking me on the path of destruction again and again and again. So, Krishna looked at Arjuna. Are you fearful now? Yes or no? So, question comes, how can I defeat this enemy called as lust? How many of you would like to defeat this enemy called as lust and save yourself from the path of destruction? Let's see what our audience is. Please raise your hands if you would like to know how to defeat this enemy called as lust and ensure that you go where you are ought to be going, not to be taken to a different place. All right. Okay, so all of you would like to know how to defeat this enemy. So thank you all for joining in, and we should see you next week. We're going to continue the discussion and talk about actually how do we defeat lust as Krishna talks about, and we're going to go into the psychology aspect of how the intelligence, mind, and senses actually interacts, and that's a fun part of it. Until then, have a wonderful week ahead. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.